Thank you very much, Chairman Corker and Ranking Member Menendez and members of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And I join Gary in applauding this initiative. It's great to see so many people here today attending this hearing and such a well-attended committee. So thank you for your focus on this issue today. I will focus my testimony on the aspect of modern slavery that is in fact most prevalent, and that's forced labor. The vast majority of the almost 21 million people in forced labor today are exploited in the private economy. Trafficking for labor exploitation accounts for 70% of trafficked people. Today, instead of shackles and chains, people are now likely to be enslaved through threats, debt, and other forms of economic coercion. The face of modern slavery can be seen in the annual cotton harvest in Uzbekistan, where the government compels teachers and children to pick cotton instead of work or study. In homes in countries as diverse as Lebanon and Singapore, where women are as enslaved as domestic workers. On construction sites in Saudi Arabia, where low-wage migrant construction workers from Nepal and India are trapped in a cycle of debt bondage. And in Cambodia, where young women garment workers are locked in factories, forced to work until they drop from exhaustion and fear. Understanding this link between worker rights violations and forced labor is key to eradicating this horrific human rights abuse globally. We see this problem as having 4 core root causes not currently being adequately addressed that I will lay out. They start with unsafe migration practices. Unsafe migration processes and the lack of labor law and other legal protections for migrant workers make them particularly vulnerable to forced labor. While stationed in Doha, Qatar for the Solidarity Center a few years back, I met a young man from Nepal who told me he paid a recruiter $6,000 to get a job there. He was promised a $400 a month salary, and he received only $250, a portion of which was docked for food and accommodation. Deceived by the recruiter in Nepal, he was now tied to his exploitative, abusive employer by the kafala system in Qatar, and his visa remained with him, and he was not able to leave that employer. We must create an enabling environment for safe migration as a core way to reduce forced labor globally. This means, in part, finally getting serious about labor recruiters. Too many manipulate and deceive workers for profit. We need to ban recruitment fees, a primary source of debt bondage and forced labor. Promoting universally respected rights for migrant workers so they can speak up and speak out when they see abuse without fear of retaliation. And we need to reform temporary work visa programs so migrants can leave abusive employers instead of staying stuck in forced labor. And I agree with Gary, it's time to end impunity for labor traffickers. Forced labor is pervasive around the world because employers who engage in modern slavery face few consequences, neither criminal nor economic. Prosecutions for forced labor globally are ridiculously low. Government's failure to hold employers criminally accountable for forced labor means that they traffic workers with impunity. But we also need to make forced labor untenable for governments to allow and for companies to get away with, including down their supply chain. Like corporations, governments also face few economic penalties or consequences for forced labor. Economic pressure and consequences are effective prevention tools and can involve carrots and sticks. For example, many countries with serious labor trafficking problems continue to receive trade preferences from the United States. And Mexico, Brunei, Malaysia, and Vietnam, all parties to the Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP negotiations, we have a moment now. Lawmakers in the context of TPP can work with the administration to make forced labor and modern slavery an issue on the table and negotiate improvements in laws and practices before any new trade agreement goes into force. Indeed, corporations often argue that it's too difficult or too expensive to monitor their entire supply chains, and they need help figuring this out. Well, I agree, but we do need to start asking why. Corporations have innovated to address quality across their supply chains. Why not the eradication of forced labor and slavery too? I think we can also promote worker-driven solutions. Workers are also key to eradicating forced labor and trafficking in supply chains. They see abuses or may themselves be exploited in a farm or on a factory. First-hand reporting of abuses and exploitation by workers, unions, and rights organizations shines a light on abusive practices long before a third party decides to take a look. With rights and protection against retaliation for exposing forced labor conditions, workers can help eradicate modern slavery. We definitely need a far more robust global response and a far more robust US government response. We need significantly greater focus and engagement to address all facets of the problem, especially the root causes of forced labor. Our ultimate goal should be the prevention of this exploitation in the first place, and that's where we should be redoubling our efforts. Last year, my colleagues in Bangladesh conducted a pre-departure training for Bangladeshis traveling to work, most of them women, headed to the Gulf as domestic workers. The trainers almost matter-of-factly told these women, "You should know that when you take these jobs, you will more than likely never get paid what you've been promised. You will likely be sexually harassed or worse, and you will have no access to remedy or justice." The class responded back to these trainers, "You know, we know that. We're the third generation of families making this trip. We know this might be our fate, but we love our children and we have no choice but to find a way to provide for them. Senators, no one trying to support their families or themselves should have to assume exploitation is their fate. We owe it to mothers like these and millions of other workers like them to fight with them for a world free from extreme labor exploitation that is forced labor." I look forward to discussing this with you further. Thank you.